Ideas or questions you have for Jill pop up, definitely make sure you get those in real time, and we can hopefully incorporate them into the conversation as much as possible. You guys are familiar with how to do that, and we should be set. So I guess taking a step back now, so we've kind of had a day and a half of discussion around sort of where we at from a policy perspective, where are some of the hangups or issues as it relates to some of the economics and business models, and this morning really a lot around kind of customers and sort of the engagement type of conversations related to distributed energy. Where would you or where would NYPA like to see kind of REV move forward from here?
We think about that all the time. Certainly we're very engaged with our customers and with our partner utilities and the state on REV. What's important for us is that we're always thinking about what's the next thing on the horizon. So we could sit, and I think there's been a lot of interesting discussions the past few days about how to perfect, value of D, or how to, kind of continue to iterate and improve on what we've accomplished. That's important to do in parallel with starting to attack the next problem. For us, we're starting to see a lot of growth in demand and potential in electric vehicles. Electric vehicle charging stations are going to require a whole different set of issues and managing how do we deal with the infrastructure challenges on the utility side. Storage, there's a lot we could talk about around storage. So I think we can celebrate, we can also debate and discuss what has been accomplished so far, but we have to do all of that while looking forward on what do we need to do next.
Great, and so let's dive into a couple of those in a little bit more detail. And first, kind of energy storage. So, we're kind of in a world in which energy storage, arguably, costs are coming down, more business models are sort of being illuminated from a feasibility perspective, but it's still kind of a nascent market. So, is it time for kind of REV and or others to kind of step in and animate the markets through kind of mechanisms like California, or kind of where do you see sort of kind of energy storage moving forward? Because I'd argue that's probably one of the top technologies that should it be unlocked and be deployed could open up the door for a lot of.
You're absolutely right. The potential from storage is huge. It's something we think about a lot. We've got a lot of interest from our customers, but there's a challenge. It's the prices are coming down, but not down enough. Even just the technology, we're doing a storage project with one of our customers, SUNY, in partnership with solar, and even just buying the battery and qualifying the battery and getting it approved through all of the testing, it has to be done in the factory. It's not like these things are just rolling off the shelves like solar panels are. So there's still a lot of innovation and advancement that needs to happen in storage, but I challenge that storage, doesn't need to be the next, technology that we necessarily have to put a lot of subsidy into, but instead, let's look creatively at the markets that we have today, at the opportunities that we know are in the near term, and find those fits where, whether it's using storage to enhance a demand response program that a customer already has, or using storage on the grid scale side to charge during negative pricing when there's more wind than there is demand at night, and get a little more creative with what we have instead of focusing so much energy on how do we get the incentives that are that might be seen as necessary.
Kind of related towards resources we have, there's kind of a question coming in related to kind of NYSERDA and NYPA and the potential for kind of can efforts be more collaborated so that there's not duplication, and that sort of all the different state agencies are working more in concert towards some of these goals that you just outlined.
Yes. Actually, the project I just mentioned that we're working on with one of our customers is a project where we're helping to fund it. The customer is funding it, NYSERDA is, and it's also with Central Hudson, the utility. So there's a lot of examples where that coordination exists. It's understandably complicated because the New York Power Authority has a certain set of customers that we focus on. NYSERDA then offers programs often not to NYPA customers because of the way the charges are done. So sometimes you need a little bit of a roadmap to get through it, but I would definitely answer that question by saying our teams are constantly talking to each other. There's many programs where we're jointly funding, or NYPA's taking the front end and NYSERDA's taking the back end, or vice versa. We all want to leverage the maximum potential out of the investments that the public and private sector are making.
Great. So we spoke about energy storage, which is kind of a distributed asset, but in terms of actually kind of large-scale renewables, do you expect to put forth another large-scale renewables RFP in the next 1 to 3 years?
We just issued it. I haven't even made awards yet. So I know Alicia mentioned it a little bit this morning. We issued an RFP on June 2nd, and we were really proud to announce recently that we had a huge response. So we got our responses back on September 8th. But I got 130 projects from 51 developers inside and outside New York. It's over 4 times the amount of renewable that we were looking for, and we haven't even read all 130 proposals yet. So we do expect that this is the beginning of what NYSERDA will be doing and NYPA will be doing on a semi-regular basis. NYSERDA will do it more often than NYPA because they're serving a larger customer base. But this is the beginning. This is projects that'll be in service 2018 to 2021 or so, and then we'll continue to solicit for more renewables. But the response was incredibly encouraging, and it just shows that the technical potential is there for us to achieve our objective of 50% renewable by 2030.
Great. What in terms of, so we spoke about renewables, we spoke about energy storage. Are there other technologies out there, such as electric vehicles, that are kind of critical to reaching these goals and achieving some of this?
I mean, if we even just step back and think about how our goals collectively, and I would argue probably many of you in the audience would say, like, we want to work towards decarbonizing our economy, right? That's part of what gets me excited about going to work every day. And in order to do that, we have to address transportation. And we have to figure out how to decarbonize transportation in an accelerated way. And so it's really encouraging to see, New York City just made an announcement with Con Edison about their charging hubs that they're going to do in every borough. NYPA, we're working with the Thruway Authority and Department of Transportation and others. We're putting charging stations and fast charging stations right on thruway rest stops so that, trying to help people get over the issue of range anxiety. But that, brings on its own challenges, because now all of a sudden you take a, relatively low demand facility like a rest stop, which has got some pizza ovens and, lighting, and you make it a huge peaking demand location. And so there we've got to look at what could maybe mobile storage do to help solve that problem, so you don't require a significant infrastructure investment that decimates the economics. But, we, I think, need to put a lot of energy into, buildings and transportation.
Right. So what are your thoughts around sort of competition and how sort of REV is really designed, or one of the intentions of REV is really to create competition as it relates to either these technology deployments or sort of access to energy just in general? It's probably not NYPA's strong suit to really kind of understand and think through what it's like to operate competitively. So any thoughts you have kind of around sort of how you all are actually taking a look at that and essentially adapting sort of go-to-market strategies?
I think that it's understandable that any kind of a monopoly, any company that has a franchise like utilities do, or a government agency like NYPA, competition is not what we were born with. It's not necessarily in our blood to be constantly looking over our shoulders and worrying about who's nipping at our heels. But that's changing. I think REV has certainly opened the doors for that conversation, but we all have to think about the fact that we're only in business because we're delivering value to a customer at a price that they're willing to pay. And as soon as someone else can deliver that exact same value for a little bit less, we're not going to be in business anymore. And I think there's some comfort thinking like, well, that doesn't affect, a big government agency like NYPA, or that doesn't affect, a utility that owns the low voltage and is providing that backup grid service that the customer wants. And that's not true, because the customer doesn't want backup grid service. The customer just wants, reliability that they can count on, and someone else could provide that. Now, not at the same cost today, but as we're seeing changes in technology and lowering of of costs of batteries, someone could provide that exact same value. So it's really important for all of us in all of our roles to constantly be thinking about competition. How can we do better for our customer? Because otherwise we're going to lose that customer. And Rev has opened up that conversation, I think, in a very positive way. Like, how do we force all of us who are part of this energy ecosystem to be competitive and to be competing so that we're providing the lowest cost and the best value for the customer?
Right, I think it kind of tangentially related to that notion of competition is this whole kind of challenge around financing, right? So we had a session yesterday, and sort of financing projects has come up as kind of, tricky in the sense that, a lot of these newer kind of technologies don't have proven cash flows, or sort of the financial community and sort of the energy community just speak two different languages. And so,
very true.
You guys have a large number of kind of large energy users, whether they're commercial CNIs or CNIs and others. So what are you seeing kind of resonate there? I know that NYPA kind of works in a much more kind of innovative way, I think, with some of its customers related to kind of.
Thank you. It's always a compliment to hear us referred to as innovative. I'll be bringing that back.
Around the financing part of it.
Oh, just financing. We're only innovative. That's okay. I'll take it. So, we just made an announcement earlier this year that we partnered with, I think, 7 private sector banks to help us expand the portfolio of financing that NYPA offers. Traditionally, and really still today, we finance a lot of our projects on our balance sheet. And we're a unique entity with strong financial capacity. And so we've been able to do $200 million or more a year in customer investments that way. But if we want to significantly grow this customer opportunity, which is what we envision doing, we're going to need to bring in partners. NYPA will eventually saturate its ability to finance all of that on its own. So we've made these new partnerships. We're doing things like municipal lease agreements, but in a lot of ways, NYPA's doing the customer acquisition, and I'm doing it at a scale so that I can then allow a private sector partner to take a package of projects. And that kind of helps them get comfortable with the risk or uncertainty around any individual project because they're taking it at a volume. And it also provides a value to the customer because they'll be able to get a lower rate than they would if they went one-on-one on their own. So we're just starting to implement that with our customers. As I said, traditionally we've done the on balance sheet, but we're really, I think, optimistic about that opportunity to help us expand our financial capacity, and through that really help us do more projects with customers.
Great. A question related to kind of the topic we just spoke about previously is, folks are curious, how does NYPA help public buildings reach their energy efficiency goals?
So we have people who are living and breathing and thinking that every day. There is an executive order that Governor Cuomo signed a few years ago called EO 88, or Build Smart New York, and that sets out a mandate for public sector, public state-owned buildings to reduce their energy use intensity by 20% by 2020. We're more than halfway through now, and I think we're around 8 or 9% or so achieved to the 20. And so we've got a very targeted approach where we do energy audits of the buildings. We review their capital plans to try to identify opportunities to fit in efficiency work at the same time of capital work that was going to get done anyway. We've got a very robust lighting program. I love talking about lighting. I love talking about LED lights. We're doing LED lighting indoors and outdoors, which has got great payback periods for our customers and helps to reduce energy use intensity quite significantly. So I would say we're kind of fighting that battle on every front because buildings are a huge opportunity for us to reduce emissions and reduce costs.
Great. Going back to the competition discussion, I guess I'd like to kind of flesh that out a little bit more and maybe have some kind of articulation points around it. So you and I were talking about previous to this session sort of a project where sort of competition actually did happen and sort of the incumbents lost. Maybe if you could kind of walk through sort of what that is and then how that might play out on the distribution level.
So on the wholesale side, I think we are seeing some trends that we could learn from that might be applicable in the near term for us on the retail and distribution side. But wholesale market is deregulated in New York. The Power companies are a mixture, but a lot of independent power producers. And more recently, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission deregulated the development of transmission and it made it a competitive environment where if a utility is looking to build a large-scale transmission project in the state, there's opportunity for merchant transmission developers to compete. You know, there's an RFP that gets issued by the New York ISO, and incumbents, who are the utilities who might own transmission in that location already or not, along with merchant transmission developers who own and develop transmission in other parts of the state, reply. So that process has been going on in several ways in New York, and just recently in the western New York part, or out of Buffalo, NYPA put in a proposal. We worked with New York State Electric and Gas as our partner. National Grid put in proposals, and then a host of merchant developers put in proposals. And you gotta think the incumbents are gonna have an advantage because it's a system that we know, that we operate, that we built. It's our lines, it might be our right of way. But in this case, after going through the whole competitive process, an independent merchant generator, NextEra, or merchant transmission developer, NextEra, is going to be the one selected. We expect they'll be selected at the NYSO board meeting next month. NYPA actually came in fourth. So, you know, it's a lot for us to learn from that experience because there's, you know, an expected advantage of being an incumbent, and some of that allows you to build and design differently than if you went in thinking you were the underdog. And so I was hopeful that we would win. Now, I think that NextEra winning and building is going to be the best option for the state, and it's going to still benefit everyone. So I want to see transmission built kind of regardless of who builds it. I want to see transmission built. But it's a lesson for all of us to also apply on the customer side of our business. You know, the utility is the one who's already in the customer home. You know, we already have a monthly relationship at a minimum with a customer. It's our relationship to lose, but we could lose it. You know, it's kind of everything is up for grabs.
I mean, so further to that point, I mean, what one kind of, I guess, area within sort of customer-facing or distribution-facing technologies kind of either makes you most anxious or one in which you would think that utilities or yourselves should be paying the most attention to? So
I think at NYPA, you know, our CEO, Gil Quinones, has really started us on a journey that he calls the digital utility. So if you see our website or our Twitter feed, or you know, you're going to see NYPA digital utility all over the place, and that's how we think that we're going to maintain our market share or grow it. That we're going to continue to provide value and new values to customers by really advancing and accelerating being digital. And for us, that means, like some of the panel right before us talking about providing information to the customer about their use, and in the connected home discussions that was in that panel. But we're looking at, you know, not just AMI, but deep submetering, getting into the customer's buildings and understanding what's the chiller doing, what's the air handling unit doing, what's the lighting load doing, and displaying all of that to them through a product that we have called New York Energy Manager, and making their whole experience with us digital. And then we're translating that too to the wholesale side of our business, where we're developing the same type of awareness and analytical capability around what are our power plants doing, what are our transmission lines doing, so that it's not just alarms that are at the local control center, but that it's all painting a picture telling us that this equipment is about to fail. So take an outage before you have an issue in the market. I believe that, you know, all the utilities and all the energy providers are going to be coming down the same digital journey that we are, but it's, you know, we're pushing full steam ahead.
Right. Great. A question getting upvoted, and curious your answer, is around whom would you support when there is a startup company and a traditional company like GE or Honeywell or Siemens when they compete on a particular project, if the benefits provided are the same?
So we've got partnerships with both types of companies. I think that it's important for us to be diverse and for us to be working with customer or companies that are both the nimble, agile opportunities
Right.
that you get working with a small stage startup versus working with larger incumbent partners who can be just as difficult to work with as we are difficult to work with. So there's advantages to us we see when we do work with these smaller companies because they're quick. You talk with one person and they know what everybody else is doing. But they might not have the scale. And so if you look kind of at some of the partnerships and awards that NYPA has made just in 2017, it's a mixture. We've got a partnership with GridPoint, which is a small company that we're doing in Long Island, and we've got a big partnership with General Electric, which is the biggest company. So.
Great. A question came in a while ago, and I think it makes sense to ask it now around energy storage. One of the things around bringing costs down for energy storage is really predicated on kind of larger scale implementations, right?
Yeah.
So those are the ones that are likely to kind of drive costs down for the industry overall, and very similar to what solar.
Yeah.
If that's the case, sort of, what are there kind of projects or areas that you guys are looking at from that perspective, as opposed to just sort of the local distributed?
Yep.
Okay.
We've got development projects on the large scale as well as the small scale. So on the large scale, in a way, we're kind of taking that same attitude that I mentioned before, is trying to figure out how to make it work within the market constraints that we have today. And thinking about putting large-scale batteries next to one of our hydro facilities where there might be times of the year that hydro is not getting a good price in the market, and I could instead use my own hydro to charge a battery and then wait for a little better peak in prices to discharge the battery and just make money on the arbitrage. But doing that maybe behind the meter next to the generator so that it just becomes like a little component of the generator, and as far as the grid is concerned, they don't know the difference. Is the megawatt coming from water or is it coming from the battery? But you're charging it for free because I'd be charging it with water. There's an opportunity certainly in many parts of New York right now because there's a lot of congestion still on the transmission system that you do see negative pricing, especially in the evening hours and in shoulder periods. And that's a great opportunity for siting storage. It could be sited alongside wind when new wind is being developed so that you allow the wind to run, but instead of running at a negative price out to the grid, it could be running to charge a battery.
Great. Something a bit related to kind of back to goals for New York State. What is the most important thing needed to transform New York's ambitious CES goal into reality?
So many things. I know transmission, I probably can't say enough, even though I know a lot of what we talked about here is on the distribution side of the business. Transmission will be critical to unlocking the potential of renewables all over the state. But we also need to get shovels in the ground with some of these projects that we've seen as proposed, both to NYPA and NYSERDA. And I mentioned we've had such a strong response to both RFPs that I think we're going to be seeing awards, NYSERDA making awards sometime this year, NYPA making awards early next year. Once we start seeing more and more projects built, I think that will help push transmission along too, and we can get really some momentum behind the large-scale renewable objectives.
Great. And as we kind of reach sort of the end of the session, I know that your group in particular at NYPA really focuses heavily on kind of customer-focused solutions and that orientation. Kind of just some parting thoughts around that for the group today. Yes.
What I think is really important for us to keep in mind, we talk about this with my team a lot, but it's important in this forum, is that we all love energy policy, right, and energy regulations, and we could sit and talk about all the technologies and price curves and demand charges, and in all of that, sometimes the customer actually gets lost. And we need to think about the customer and, as our true north, really, as what's keeping us grounded. And I think there's a clarifying situation going on in the world right now in Puerto Rico, because as I'm sure you all know, Puerto Rico effectively has no electricity. The electric grid has effectively been destroyed. We have 10 engineers there from NYPA right now who are doing damage assessment, working with the Puerto Rican utility, but not yet doing any kind of restoration. And at that location, the customer wants one thing, right? They want lights, they want their machines to operate, they want clean water, the basic functions and services that a utility is providing. And here, we're very fortunate that we're not in that situation every day with our customers, but at the end of the day, we got to keep in mind that the customer doesn't want to talk about a lot of complicated regulatory policy and want to have to add together all these different value streams in order to do a project. The customer just wants lights. They just want a bill they can afford. And we just got to keep in mind that the customer is really, at our heart, our true north, our center, and that we don't get caught up too much in the complexity of our own business.
Great. And I think with that, we'll wrap this session. Thank you, Jill.
Great. Thank you for having me.